Under the wide Missouri sky, the once mighty McBee farm and cattle spread across miles of golden pasture. It was a family empire built on grit, tradition, and long days that started before dawn. But in the heart of that empire now hung a silence heavier than a storm. The patriarch himself, Steve McBee Sr., had finally spoken after the gavel came down on a case that had shaken the foundation of everything he built. For months, rumors had swirled around small towns and across social media. People whispered in diners, posted screenshots, and speculated endlessly. Was Steve Sr. guilty? Was the McBee name, once synonymous with integrity, now marked by scandal? But on the day of his sentencing, Steve Sr. finally broke his silence. The fall of a giant. It was a crisp autumn morning when the news broke. McBee family patriarch sentenced in federal crop fraud case. The details painted a story almost too dramatic for reality TV, though fittingly, the McBees were no strangers to cameras. After all, their family had been thrust into the national spotlight thanks to the McBee dynasty, Real American Cowboys, a series that showcased their rugged lives, complex relationships, and growing empire. Now, however, the spotlight was unflinching. The federal court found that Steve Sr. had overreported crop yields and claimed disaster relief funds for acres that hadn't suffered losses. Prosecutors framed it as deliberate deceit, a manipulation of the system for financial gain. His defense team argued it was an accounting error, tangled paperwork from years of droughts, floods, and family transitions. But when the judge handed down a 2-year prison sentence, the courtroom fell into stunned silence. And for a man who had built his life on the idea that you stand tall, no matter what storm comes, Steve Sr. did exactly that. His sons, Stephen Jr., Cole, and Jesse, sat behind him, faces tense but proud. No tears, no outbursts, just quiet unity. When the verdict ended, Steve Sr. turned to them and whispered, "We'll get through this. This too shall pass." A man of the land. To understand the shock of the McBee case, one must understand the man behind it. Born and raised in the rolling hills of Gallatin, Missouri, Steve McBee Sr. was a self-made rancher. He came from nothing, a kid who learned the language of the land before he ever learned to dream of money. His first tractor was older than he was, his first barn a patchwork of salvaged lumber. He built McBee Farm and cattle from the ground up, literally. Through droughts, floods, and market crashes, he stayed stubbornly devoted to his soil. By the time the cameras arrived for the McBee dynasty, the ranch had become one of the most respected operations in the Midwest, sprawling acres of corn, soybeans, and cattle as far as the eye could see. But with growth came complexity, new land, new investments, new paperwork, and, inevitably, new mistakes. Somewhere in those tangled years of expansion, something went wrong. What had once been a simple family operation was now a corporate labyrinth, with financial filings, contracts, and crop insurance claims that stretched into hundreds of pages. And when investigators came knocking, it wasn't just about paperwork. It was about the McBee name. The statement that broke the silence. For months, Steve Sr. stayed quiet. His family fielded the cameras. His sons posted vague messages about resilience and trusting God's timing, but the man himself said nothing. That changed one late October evening. A simple Facebook post appeared on the McBee farm page, a black and white photo of Steve Sr. standing against the sunset, his hands in his pockets, his hat pulled low. The caption was brief. "This too shall pass. I've made mistakes, I've made enemies, but I've also made a life I'm proud of. To those who know me, truly know me, you understand that this farm was never about money. It was about legacy, family, and the land beneath our feet. The truth always rises, and when it does, I'll still be standing here, boots in the dirt, ready to rebuild. Steve McBee Sr." Within hours, the post went viral. Comments poured in, thousands of them. Some were supportive, others were brutal. But one thing was clear: people were listening. The family divided. Behind the scenes, the McBee family was navigating a storm of its own. Stephen Jr., the eldest son and acting head of the ranch, was suddenly thrust into the spotlight again. The same cameras that had once captured his romantic entanglements and leadership challenges were now aimed at him for a very different reason: survival. He had to hold the farm together while his father served time. In an emotional interview on a local news segment, Stephen Jr. held back tears as he said, "We're not walking away from this. We've got crops in the ground, cattle to feed, and employees counting on us. Dad built something worth saving, and we're going to save it." His brothers, Cole and Jesse, were less vocal publicly, but insiders say tensions ran high. Cole wanted to rebrand, to distance the family from the controversy. Jesse, ever loyal to his father, refused to change a thing. Family dinners grew quieter. Every phone call with their dad carried both love and frustration. But one thing bound them: the belief that their father's name still meant something. Behind prison walls. The first few weeks after Steve Sr. reported to federal custody were hard for everyone. His absence was felt not just at home, but across every acre of the ranch. The workers missed his early morning coffee runs. His grandkids missed his booming laugh and his never-give-up speeches. Even the cattle seemed unsettled by the change, though perhaps that was just the human imagination at work. But inside, Steve Sr. found a strange peace. He began keeping a journal. According to a close family friend, he wrote letters to his sons nearly every week, part advice, part reflection, part prayer. In one letter that was later shared publicly, he wrote, "The walls don't define you. The mistakes don't define you. What defines a man is what he does when everything's stripped away." He started leading small Bible study groups, mentoring younger inmates who had grown up on farms and fallen into similar traps of desperation and bad decisions. Word spread through the facility: the cowboy from Missouri had become something of a folk legend inside. And slowly, even behind bars, Steve Sr. began rebuilding his sense of purpose. The public reaction. While some critics saw the sentencing as long overdue accountability, others viewed it as a tragedy, a symbol of how the system often punishes farmers more harshly than corporate giants. Agricultural forums lit up with debates. Many ranchers shared stories of their own struggles with insurance claims, government forms, and the razor-thin margins that often push honest people toward risky choices. "He's not some Wall Street crook," one commenter wrote. "He's a man who spent 40 years feeding people." Meanwhile, the McBee Dynasty producers faced their own dilemma: whether to continue filming the next season. Fans speculated wildly. Would they show the aftermath? Would they follow Stephen Jr. as he took over the ranch? Would Steve Sr. appear in interviews from prison? The production company stayed silent, but one anonymous source hinted, "This story isn't over. The McBees are the definition of resilience, and America loves a comeback." Redemption and reality. Months passed. The farm's finances took a hit, but the family kept the operation running. Stephen Jr. became the public face of the brand, working tirelessly to protect their contracts, repair their image, and keep their employees paid. Local businesses rallied behind them, offering support and refusing to let gossip define decades of community contribution. Meanwhile, Steve Sr.'s social media post, "This too shall pass," became something of a mantra across the farming community. People began posting it on their own photos: crops in the dust, barns under floodwater, tractors breaking down in the field. Somehow, a scandal had become a slogan for survival. The day of return. When Steve Sr. finally walked out of prison, 2 years later, leaner, grayer, but unbroken, his sons were waiting for him at the gate. No cameras, no media circus, just family. They drove straight home to the farm. As they turned down the familiar dirt road, Steve Sr. rolled down the window. The smell of cut hay hit him like a memory. The sun dipped low behind the barn, the same barn he built with his bare hands decades ago. There were new fences, new signs of change, but the land was still his. It always had been. When they arrived, a few neighbors stood waiting. Quiet handshakes, claps on the back, and nods of understanding. Nobody needed to say much. Steve Sr. looked around, took off his hat, and whispered, "You held it together." Stephen Jr. smiled, emotion cracking through his tough exterior. "We did what you taught us, Dad." And for the first time in years, the McBee family sat together around a dinner table, not as reality TV personalities, not as subjects of gossip or headlines, but as what they'd always been, a family bound by hard work, imperfection, and love. A legacy rewritten. Months after his release, Steve Sr. began writing a book. Its tentative title? This Too Shall Pass: Lessons from a Life in the Dirt. It wasn't a tell-all or a defense or a scandal expose. It was part memoir, part manual for resilience, a reflection on what it means to rise, fall, and rebuild when the world is watching. He spoke at local churches and agricultural conventions, urging young farmers to be cautious, transparent, and brave enough to ask for help before pride leads them astray.